All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. One of the interesting things that happens when you are old, like we are, Robin, and you connect with people who you were friends with when you were younger, right? Especially elementary school kids. Mm-hmm. I have friends on Facebook who I literally haven't seen since the 4th grade. Okay, but now I'm in touch with them again. Okay, now I want to talk mostly about the women because when I was that age, you know, the thing they always made, the media made it seem like boys didn't like girls. I didn't not like girls. Mm-hmm. Everybody was the same as far as I was concerned. I don't remember, but here's the thing. Here's what I wanted to say, that in those ages, before we become sexualized, as Dr. Ruth used to say, right?
Yes.
I don't remember thinking anything about Jane or Jimmy as being anything different than just my friends and my classmates. I never thought sexually, of course. None of us did at that age, I guess, or most of us. Woody Allen says he did, but but I don't. But I didn't. You know what I mean? A lot of the stereotypes that they tagged you with were not true at all. I mean, I wasn't really the guy who liked baseball. I liked music. I heard Nathan Lane one time. On, I think he might have been on David Letterman, but he was on one of the talk shows, and he said, "Of course I'm gay. I like Broadway. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm not gay. I like Broadway. What does that mean? What's that supposed to mean? You know?" Heath Fogg Davis has written a very insightful book. Heath is an associate professor of political science at Temple University in Philadelphia. I'll put the cover of the book on the streaming video in just a second. Heath has written a book called Beyond Trans. Does gender matter? This is an interesting question, isn't it? With all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, mm-hmm. You have children, you love your children. You know, you're not going to not love them if they suddenly reveal to you that they're gay or that they really feel like they are an opposite sex from what you have believed they were all along. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I'm smart enough to understand it, but I know this. This is what I know. That we have to love one another, you know? We can't hate somebody because they decide that they want to wear lipstick or they want to cut their hair short or you know? Heath Fogg Davis, am I saying your name right? Good morning, Heath. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well, and yes, you are saying my name right.
Where are you? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Philadelphia.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. And are you currently teaching in school today, or you just taking a break for the radio show?
No teaching this summer.
Okay. Oh, school's out. Of course. What am I thinking?
Our days run together.
Yeah. You got to come to Florida then.
Yeah.
No, don't come to Florida. It's too hot right now. You know what you do? You wait till. Have you ever been down here?
I have. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Several times.
And where's your favorite place? We'll get to the real topic in a second. What's your favorite place to visit?
Well, it's been a long time, so I would have to go way back to when I was 10, and it's either Disney World or Disneyland. I get them confused, but one of those.
Oh my gosh, you can't get them confused.
I know.
It's Disney World.
A whole world down here. New stuff. Avatars just opened.
I had a great time, so yeah.
Well, you know what I saw one day? This is going to lead into the book and into the topic. Okay. I saw a lady walk past. We do the show from the mall, and a lady was shopping, and she came out the door where I could see, and she was wearing a top, and over one breast was the Mickey Mouse logo, and over the other breast was the Minnie Mouse logo, and it had a plus sign between the two, and it said, "This plus this equals love."
Right.
So there you go. I mean, right there, the bow, the bow between the ears indicates female.
Exactly.
Right. And that's sort of what you're talking about, isn't it? That we have these labels and we have these expectations of people based on what we believe those labels mean.
Absolutely. And it all boils down to sort of quick visual assessments of each other in the public sphere about whether, and it's all subjective, you know, we think that there are these objective standards for who's male and who's female, and statistically, yes, there's some, you know, we can say statistically that most people who are assigned female at birth or go on to identify that way in their lives, and the same thing with those who are designated male, but we also know that there are people who go on to identify as the opposite sex, and then there are a lot of people who also don't necessarily identify as either male or female, and they might be gender fluid or identify as neither.
Okay, and I don't even understand gender fluid. What does that mean? One day I'm a man and the next day I'm a woman?
It's a term, and it's a term that I've heard used by people who don't want to be categorized into male or female, and maybe yes, like you said, maybe feel that they're either somewhere in between, or they're both components in their identity, and that might change from time to time in their lives. So,
the one thing I think we hopefully agree on is that if I see you in public transportation, let me just use this as an example because I think I saw a picture like this on Facebook or something, and there's a person who appears to be biologically male, but he's wearing a dress and makeup. I mean, he's not hurting me in any way. He's sitting there, or she's sitting there. I don't know what, and maybe that's the point. We don't know what to say, he or she, but that person is sitting there, minding his or her own business, and I have no reason to dislike that person. That person might save me if I suddenly have a heart attack. Might give me CPR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't. So that's the part I think we agree on.
Right. Yeah, and it's really interesting that you brought up the example of public transportation, because I begin the book with an anecdote that inspired me to write this book, which is in Philadelphia, we had this very strange policy with our bus passes from 1981 all the way up to 2013, where you had to have a gender sticker of M for male or S for female on your monthly bus pass, which was a very strange practice. A lot of other cities, by the way, had this, but they abandoned it a long time ago. Anyway, Philadelphia persisted, and so a transgender woman, Charlene Arcilla, who happened to be African American as well, tried to use an F-marked pass and was turned away by the bus driver, who said, you're not a real woman.
Oh.
And then and so then she went back and she said, let me try this with an M pass and see what happens. And of course, she appeared feminine, and so the bus driver said, you can't use that either because you're not a man. And so she brought a legal complaint against the Public Transportation Authority, because you could see in this instance, it goes back to the point where it makes absolutely no sense for a bus driver to be making any kind of judgments about who's a real man and who's a real woman. However, that was the case, and it put this person in a no-win situation where she literally could not use a bus pass.
Well, that's crazy. Now, see, on that, I have no problem. I can tell you straight away, in case you want to argue something that I'm not going to argue that at all. I love the point you're making there, and that is, what difference does it make if you're riding a bus? That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
The part we might argue on, I don't know if you will or not, is when we say that somebody who is transgender should use the shower at the high school of the sex that they are biologically, you know what I mean? I think a lot of people, especially fathers of daughters, parents of daughters, not just fathers, parents of daughters, don't want some guy, somebody who's born as a male in the shower with them. They're probably okay with the restroom because you're in a stall. But it's the shower. That's the shower, I think, that they're having an issue with.
So let's jump into that example, because it's an important one, and it's the thing that I think you're right. It raises people's sort of hackles about it, and they're not sure. Maybe that's a limitation that we should have. However, to me, both the restroom and locker room scenarios, there's an architectural solution to this, which is to have individual stalls where people can have their privacy.
Yeah.
And if you think about a lot of gyms right now, like I know at my gym, you already have this. So it's very uncommon these days to have that open shower area where everybody is naked and they're showering and can see each other, because there's a lot of other reasons why people don't want to see other people naked.
Of the
same gender.
It's not that I don't want to see anybody naked. I don't want anybody. I don't want anybody to see me naked. Is the problem there? Yeah.
Right. You don't want to be judged, right? And so I think that's to give people their individual privacy while they're taking a shower or using the restroom makes complete sense to me. I think we have a reasonable expectation to have some degree of privacy.
I think. Oh wow!
When we're in the public sphere.
So we're on the same page. I can't think of any other area. I can't think of any other area in this subject that I could foresee an argument. I think we now agree on everything. Tell me your story. Tell us all your story, if you don't mind, unless it's too personal.
Sure. No, I share a little bit of my own story in the book, so I'm happy to chat with you a little bit about it. So I transitioned from female to male pretty late in life. So I'm 46 right now, and I transitioned at the age of 38. So what I noticed when I went through my transition was that my employer, and I work at Temple University, very well intentioned and as far as like trying to accommodate, what does this mean and what do we need to do to make you comfortable and to make this work administratively. Came up with some ad hoc kind of solutions that didn't actually work very well. So just quickly, going back to the restroom issue. So I was given like a list of the gender neutral bathrooms that existed on campus, which again, very well intentioned. But a couple of things. Number one, these restrooms were not in every building, and they were sort of, few and far between. So the convenience factor there, is a huge issue in terms of that kind of accommodation. The other thing was that I had never asked for that kind of accommodation. So there's an assumption, I think, when we talk about this, that every transgender person wants to have a separate gender-neutral bathroom.
Right.
I say let's redesign all public bathrooms differently so that they work for everybody. Because there are other people who, not just trans people, who are their lives are made difficult by sex-segregated restrooms. You think I'm a parent as well, so I have a 2-year-old daughter. So whenever I'm in public and I have to change her diaper, I have to violate the sex segregation policy and take her into a men's room. The same goes, for mothers with opposite-sex children. For teachers who are on field trips with young kids, they have to navigate this. And for anybody who is a caretaker of somebody who might have a disability or an elderly person who needs help using the restroom in the public. It presents an obstacle for so many people. So my own kind of experience and my own story kind of shed a light on that stuff and said, look, what if it's not really working for me or we're making a big fuss of this? Like, who else is burdened by this? And how could we do things differently to help everybody?
So did you feel like you were male when you were younger? Have you always felt like a male?
I would say, back in as I said again, so now we're going way back to like the 70s and 80s, where we really didn't even have the terminology, and I grew up in
that's what I was trying to express when I was little. I'm just curious if you were bullied, that kind of stuff. Did you go through that period?
I did, and I was definitely, I guess, what we would call now sort of like a gender non-conforming kid, in that I wanted to wear boys' clothing, and I did not, I gravitated to all the things that were masculine, and fortunately I had parents that supported me in that, and of course we didn't have it wasn't a possibility at that point, but things change, and
As an adult, I apologize if this is going over the line, but are you sexually attracted to women?
Well, I have a wife. Yep. So for me, prior to my transition, I did identify as lesbian. So that's how I always identified, and so that's my sexual orientation remained the same. And I think it's important to point out, for your listeners and for this kind of discussion, that sexual orientation and gender are two different. Gender identity are two different things. So transgender people can be just like cisgendered, which is a term we use like for non-transgender people.
Yeah.
Can be any sexual orientation, gay, straight, bisexual.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing I think that confuses us. When you hear Caitlyn Jenner say that she's still attracted to women, right?
Mm-hmm.
It confuses us. And we say, well, what? Well, I don't understand this. And it's understandable why we don't understand it. It's something new, I think, for most of us. But I think going back to the core of just being non-judgmental and imagine if you're, Cher, and suddenly her little girl decides she's a little boy. I mean, she still loves her little boy. I mean, her child.
Mm-hmm.
She still loves. I mean, so that's it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. That's really all that matters. If you grant, we had a male gay couple in here that wrote a book about horticulture. Was it about plants?
Yep.
One of them wrote it, and the other one illustrated it. It was amazing. I had no idea that they were a couple until later on they told us. And they had to have been up. They were at least in their 70s, weren't they?
Yeah.
And they had been together for 50 years. So it's like, okay,
wow,
well,
that's
you know,
great.
how can you judge somebody? There was a baseball manager, I think it was in New York, who was condemning people for saying bad things about people who are gay or transgender, and saying, well, what difference does it make to me who you love? I just want to play a game. I just want to play the game of baseball.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it's such an important point. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And you have to, you really know who your true friends are. I know my children, they're in their late 30s now, and they grew up with a really good friend. And then that friend was a male, and now he changed all the way to a female. He's living in New York and happy, and they're still friends with him.
And he's hot,
her.
too.
Yeah. He's
hot.
really hot too. But they're still friends, whether they go up and see him when they're up there and everything. And you really, it's the person as a whole. It's not what you look like on the outside.
Yeah. And your point about sort of like, what's relevant, when is it relevant, and when is it not, is such a good one. And in this book, I started off with that scenario about the ridiculous bus pass sex marker policy. But that made me think about things like driver's licenses and birth certificates and passports. Like, why do we have M and F on those documents as well? And so I have a chapter in the book where I really question that. And when you really dig down and start to think about it and what purpose those markers are serving, they're not efficient and they're not useful, because your male and femaleness are not good ways of keeping track of your personal identity, because obviously they're characteristics we share with many people.
What do you do? So what do you do about the language, about pronouns? What do you do? I mean,
yeah, it's got to be hard.
Do we have a new word? Do you know? There's part of this though that I guess we could argue. Sports that require brawn. Sports that require brawn. Now, if you have a transgender male or even a female who wants to play football,
right?
I don't think the sex should matter, which it seems to, I guess, in today's sports. I'm guessing, right? I don't see any female football players.
Well,
but I mean, if it requires brawn, like in football. Baseball doesn't require brawn. Baseball you can play. I don't see any reason to keep. But I'm just saying they should pass some kind of a brawn test, not a sex test.
Right.
If you're big enough, you can play. That's what makes sense.
Yeah. That's kind of what the point that I make, because the sports chapter is the final chapter in the book, because I think it's the toughest. And I thought you might circle back to this, because I think both the restroom issue for privacy and safety, and then the sports issue for the brawn issue that you're talking about, and also I think a sense of like paternalism about not wanting for girls to be tackled by boys, or the sort of like protective kind of thing that we have going on in our culture. But I agree with you, and it's interesting. All of the professional sports associations, the NFL, the NHL, NBA, none of them have official sex segregation policies. So it's feasible that you could have a woman join the NBA, and there have been some isolated incidents of like where, women like Brittany Griner was invited to try out, but she ended up going to the WNBA. So there's no official policy there. It's just a kind of an assumption. And then the question is, do you want to kind of assimilate transgender people into the existing sex binary, or kind of question it in the first place?
Where do you see us? Where do you see us? I guess I'm just limiting it to America, or to North America anyway.
Yeah.
Where do you see us in 10 years? Do you see us past this? Are we going to get past this at all anytime?
Yeah. I think whether we get past it or not, but I think it will look very, very different in terms of our culture, because I'm a professor, so I'm constantly, teaching people who are 19, 20, 21, and I've noticed that increasingly with younger people, the issue of gay rights, for example, is almost like a non-issue for a lot of my students. They don't even see what the big deal is, and increasingly the same thing is happening with transgender and gender nonconforming identities as well. That it's just not a big deal. That doesn't mean that there aren't conservative students, and there won't be a huge block of the country that will, I think, still maybe dig their heels in. But I think it will become much like being gay or lesbian has become for us. It's for most people, it's not a big deal for the reasons that you talked about. It's not hurting anybody, and it's just something to kind of get used to.
And your book is really, really well done, and because you just don't have observations from the outside. It's actually a part of a memoir for yourself, and it's very difficult for a person to bear their all, and that's what makes this book really credible.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
I think we'd get along.
I do.
I think if we hung out, we'd be
It's a great conversation. Yeah.
No, but I think we wouldn't. This wouldn't even be the conversation. If we met at a hotel, right, we were in the lobby, I think we'd probably be just chatting about everything else. I just, every once in a while, a hot girl might walk by, and I might go, "Hey, look at her," and you might, and you might go, "Yeah, look at that." I'm just having fun.
And as far as marriage goes, with all of the legalities for like beneficiaries for life insurance policies and things like that, those are also important issues to address, because you're a couple and you love somebody and you want to make sure they're taken care of if you go first.
Yeah. And that kind of goes to another issue that I talk about in the book, which is sort of like the bureaucratic forms, So almost every form we're asked to fill out asks us to check a male or female box. And in a lot of those cases, you have to ask the same question: is it relevant? Is it important? When we signed our kid up for daycare, right after her name on the form was the sex categories, and you could make an argument that's important for the daycare to know that, but I would have to have that explanation. Otherwise, it doesn't seem like my whole argument is that we should presume that gender doesn't matter until we find out that it does, and when we do think it matters, that we explain to somebody that we're asking what definition of gender we're using and why it matters.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
That's interesting. I don't feel old unless I'm with somebody younger than me, and I don't feel young unless I'm with somebody older than me. and in this,
I see where you're going.
Yes. Well, the same thing is true when I'm alone at home. If I'm not exposed to women, I'm not really thinking about it. It's later on, like when I go out and stuff. But I don't know if that's true for everybody. I think you're right. I think the soul of us all, the core of us all, is just a human being.
Exactly.
And I think, gosh, that's a wonderful message that you're giving us, Heath. Heath Fogg Davis, thank you so much. I have a copy of the book right here. I know some of you would like it. Give me a call if you want the one that was sent to me. It's called Beyond Trans: Does Gender Matter? And the book, I found it on Amazon. It's got rave reviews. Hopefully you've been watching the video. I'll put this up as a podcast later on. I got the cover of the book on there finally. Thank you, Heath. Thank you for being on the air with us today.
Oh, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Okay, we will be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. This evening, unblocked parts of the Trump administration's travel ban take place.
The new guidelines, which go into effect at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, say that applicants from 6 majority Muslim countries must prove a close relationship in the U.S., such as a parent, spouse, or child, in order to enter the country. Foreign nationals with bona fide educational or business ties